out here at Apex Garage with the number 916 and Juker Racing LS350Z. As a lot of you guys know, this car previously was set up for time attack and time trial racing, but this year we're going to be taking on 9-hour endurance races with AER as well as ST2 racing with NASA. A couple of the things we have to change this off-season, mostly small things, but we need to add some weight to the car, we need to change the tune a little bit, and we also need to look at tire wear and longevity of the parts on this car, so we're going to be addressing the alignment today. Kevin is going to teach you guys how to do a string alignment because I'm still learning this process myself, so we're going to be learning together. Basically, I'm just going to be the guy that holds the steering wheel and driver weight, and maybe I'll turn some wrenches.
Woohoo! Alignment time. I love alignment time.
Alright guys, so I know a lot of you have asked, and I've seen it on a lot of the Facebook groups, how to string align your car. It's a pretty important thing to know if you're racing a lot, if you have a lot of wear and tear on the car, and if you don't have access to an alignment rack, or if you're like us and have cars that are way too low to get on any actual laser alignment rack. Laser is obviously the best. It's used lasers to shoot down the side of the car, refracts off some reflectors, bounces back, and gives you the proper measurements. That is completely accurate as long as the system is calibrated properly. But the next closest thing is string aligning. I know a lot of people check their toe with toe plates. The problem with toe plates is all it's really doing is just telling you how much toe the wheels are compared to each other. It's not actually showing you whether they are centered on the steering wheel or not. So that's why sometimes if you guys have ever been at a racetrack and you're adjusting your toe with camber plates, you'll notice that after you did an adjustment, your steering wheel is a little bit off center. Because it's not accounting for the fact that you could be moving the steering input while also adjusting the toe. So, having said all of that, it's really easy to do. You just have to be pretty precise, measure multiple times, but you can do it with household objects. The only non-household object we're going to use today is this nice bar that we have. It's got a seam in the middle that we can screw together. It's also got some nice notches on the end to fit the string on. But if you have a broomstick that's long enough, which is kind of long, but anything that's straight that you can lay onto 2 jack stands and is wide enough for the car. So you want to be able to have a string that goes down the side of the car, and it needs to be wide enough to go on both sides. You don't need much clearance off the wheel. You actually want to be within an inch or 2. And then on top of that, the easy stuff is tape measures, or I said that backward, ruler or tape measures, some fishing string, and if you're fancy, maybe some weights and some trash bags. So to get started, obviously you've seen I've already set up my parallel bar. I got to set up the back one, and then we're going to get the car on some trash bags because it allows the car to move around on the ground if you're making adjustments. Also allows the suspension to settle properly as you lower it off of jack stands or off of a lift in this case.
All right, so Savannah's over here tying some knots and some weights to these strings. Excuse me if I get a little bit nerdy here, guys. I do enjoy doing alignments, as Savannah is well aware. Yeah, pretty much anything alignment-wise or suspensions-wise is right up my alley. So, as you can see, we've got a weight on the end of the fishing string here, wrapped around one end of the pole, another on the other side, and then it comes up here to the front. And on the front side, we just make a loop. Now, as you guys saw, I had Savannah doing this because I'm terrible at doing knots. Don't ask me. I guess, never did Boy Scouts, whatever. So, as you can see, we've got a nice string down this side and a nice string down this side. It's kind of hard to see. Hopefully you can see it there. The entire idea of this is to make basically 2 parallel lines on each side of the car. Savannah asked a really good question earlier. What do you do with the jack stands? Do you make sure that those are parallel or perpendicular with the lines that you're making over here? And in a perfect world, yes. In our world, given that we're only traversing the length of the car, if these are off by a couple of degrees, I don't think it's going to matter much. When we fine tune our lines here in a second, you're going to see why that doesn't matter a whole lot. Because all we're really trying to do is just get an equal amount from, let's say, a point of reference on all of the wheels, like this cap here, to the string. So all we're trying to do is make sure that each corner has the exact same gap between all of the strings. And that is why I like to use a ruler instead of a tape measure. Because a ruler, you can come in here and you have that nice flat edge down there, and you can do the measurement. But before we do that, first thing is first. Savannah's got them pretty close. The important step that a lot of people forget about is that you need to make sure that the line is perpendicular with the center of the wheel. So come down, crouch down, try to get your eye level with the center of the wheel and make sure that the line is going through it. As you can see, it's pretty good there. We're about 2 clicks up on the front jack stand. On the rear jack stand, we're a different jack stand, but should be close enough. But you can see we're a little bit higher right there. So we need to lower that. I'm gonna let Savannah dial this in because she's got better skills of lining these things up than I do sometimes.
That seems closer to me.
Now, as you guys can see, on this side of the car, we actually don't have those caps. So what we might do is go to a different reference point or put those caps on. Sometimes I'll use the inner lip here, but you don't have a whole lot of surface area to make sure that you're on an equal plane. So we may fix that here in a second. As you guys can see, Savannah's adjusting the height of the line over there to try to get it perfectly through the center of the wheels. So Savannah and I got ahead of ourselves a little bit here as we were putting the strings on. I forgot to put the trash bags underneath the wheels. Luckily, we're on a lift that has a little bit of clearance, so we're gonna raise it up without actually hitting the strings. Oh, shut up! You didn't remember either. So we're gonna do that real quick. Luckily, we got it up enough. It's not hitting the strings yet. It doesn't matter anyway because we haven't dialed in the strings. So as you can see, Savannah's got a trash bag here. The entire point is to have it double layered and fit on the contact patch of where the tire hits. So she's got to probably stretch that out a little bit more width-wise. With these wide tires, they don't have to be perfect. You're more worried about the inside lip than the outside lip on these tires because we have a lot of camber in the car. See if we can get ahead of her here and help her out. One-handed here. Also, don't mind that we have the scales out. We were doing a little bit of corner balancing, trying to figure out how much weight we did have to add to the car. And as of right now, the car is 2770 no driver, 2885 with driver. Must be nice to be that light, race car driver lady.
I don't see you go to the gym.
I'm never gonna get that light. Here comes the fun part. So get your ruler. Now that we've got all the strings lined up, we're gonna make sure that the strings are parallel with each other. We're not doing the alignment yet. We're just trying to get everything organized and even so we can do a proper alignment. This is where the lasers really kick our butt. So we have to make sure that with the strings that we double, triple, quadruple check all the measurements. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take the ruler and the same spot on all of the wheels, we're gonna find a flat surface. Luckily, these Koenigs have this nice center cap here that we can put a ruler against. And then we're going to measure where the string is compared to the ruler. Now, an important thing during alignments that I learned over the years is make sure that the same person is doing all of the readings on the rulers because it's a matter of perspective. If the camera is my head and I'm looking down on top of the ruler from this angle, it's gonna look different if I'm from this angle. So you need to make sure that when you're measuring this, you're always doing the same position with your hands, with your legs, with your head, and trying to be as accurate as humanly possible when you're getting your parallel line set up. So, looking at this, getting in my little alignment stance here, my number here is 143 millimeters. I like to use millimeters. It's easier to subtract left and right. It's easier to find that happier number than sitting there doing fractions. Plus, I know we're in America, but metric makes more sense. If you don't disagree with me, put it in the comments, but I don't care.
Flame them.
Yeah. Front, let's see, we're at 148. So as you can see right now, the front is a little bit further away than the rear. But before we get carried away front to rear, we need to make sure that the front left to the front right is equal. So 140, I'm gonna call that 148 and a half. We're gonna come over here, check this side. We're at about 148 and a half again, okay? So that's good. Now, the reason I want you to go left to right first on the front and then left to right rear first is because some of these modern cars have offsets. The fronts might be more narrow than the rear. So your number front to rear might not be exactly the same. You're just trying to get your left number to match your right front and your left number to match your right in the rear. So we're gonna come back to the rear,
since the front's already pretty close at 148, not gonna lie, Savannah and I did dial that in a little bit before we filmed. So we're gonna come back here. Gonna move the scale that we corner bounced earlier. So back here, I look to be about 137 on the strings.
It was 143 on the other side.
43 over here, is that what it was? Mm-hmm. I'm gonna verify that again. Savannah's got the best memory, 143. So 137 on that side, 143 on this side. The number we're gonna aim for in the rear is obviously 140. So I'm gonna move this thing just a little bit, because we're talking 3 millimeters. Now keep in mind, sometimes when you're doing this with jack stands and the pole like that, things will move. So if you accidentally bump into something, or if the car rolls, or something moves at all, just remeasure. The last thing you wanna do is bump something and then keep measuring things as you go and get lost in your mess up, and then by the time you get back to your actual alignment, it'll be way off. So that is one thing I cannot stress enough with string alignments, is quadruple check all of your measurements. So we moved it a little bit. All right, well that was a pretty good first guess there. He's at 140 now. Okay, this side, this part is pretty tedious, but we're trying to get perfect parallel lines. That looks pretty good at 140. Now let's go check the front, since the rear is at 140. The front, I am at, so with my adjustments in the rear, I was at 148 in the front here, now I'm at 149 here. So now we're gonna check this side and see what it does before we make any measurements. Also be careful, I did almost hit that. That happens often, sadly. Yeah, so over here, I'm now 147.5, so I'm about 3/4 of a mil off. So I'm gonna have Savannah move the rod just ever so slightly. Like I showed you guys earlier, if she twists it a little bit instead of pushing it, you'll get a finer adjustment. You need to go this way, Savannah.
You just pointed the
Sorry,
other way.
alright, that's good. Go driver's side just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit. That's good. Alright, so we're at 148.5 there. Let's go over to this side. It helps to have a chair because your back's going to kill you at some point. But, like I said, me looking on a chair versus me standing like this might have a different viewpoint. So you need to make sure that you're in the same spot every time. What did I say over there? 148.5? Mm-hmm. 148.5 here. Okay. Now, also one note, the line that I have takes up about, I would say, a half a mil on the ruler. So you also get a perception thing where the light kind of refracts around the round string, and it's hard to see sometimes. So make sure you move your head a little bit just back and forth, just to make sure you're seeing the number that you're supposed to be seeing there. Obviously, this is never going to be perfect. You know, I could sit here and do this for 6 hours with the same ruler and do everything humanly possible to eliminate all the variables. It may still be off by a little bit. Which, again, you can spend $30 on this, or you can buy how much are laser alignment racks? Couple grand probably.
More than
So
that.
I'll take my couple mil off every once in a while.
Hunter.
Yeah, right. All right, so 140 back here. $140 back here. So good. Looks like I might be all right. 148.5. Now you guys see I'm doing this pretty quick. I've done this a lot, so I kind of know my stance and how I like to do it. If you guys are doing this for the first time, be a little bit slower. Just, you know, I'm going to do this twice as you've seen. Do it 3 or 4 times until you get your rhythm figured out. So 148.5. All right, now, those numbers are pretty good numbers. As long as we know to always put these back in the same slot. If you have a broomstick, you could take like a zip tie or something like that and make a channel if you wanted. We're gonna write down these numbers because if we lift the car up, if we need to do something, we need to move the strings, we have numbers now to reference that's gonna get us back to square really quickly, or at least in the same ballpark. Now you will notice if you do move something and you have to go back to those measurements, you might notice that things move a little bit. Just work with it. If you notice that maybe you're not 148 and a half, maybe you're 149 now, just make sure you check all the corners and it should be fine. So we're gonna write those numbers down. 140, right?
Yeah, 140.
You see me questioning myself, even though Savannah has a great memory.
It's 140 rear, 148 and a half front.
All right, 140. I know the front is 148 and a half. So 140 rear, 148.5 front. So as you guys can see, there is a difference front to rear on the track width of the car. So now comes the fun part. So to get your alignment, now that you're convinced that you have two parallel lines running down the entire, both sides of each car, here's where it gets fun. And here's where toe plates lose to this. If you're doing a toe plate, you're just checking the toe overall. You're not checking what the toe is on each corner. So you could potentially use toe plates and crank one corner out, 3 degrees or 5 mil or whatever the hell you want it to be, and you're only cranking out one side. Your toe is what it says on the toe plates, but now your steering wheel center has moved. So we're gonna make sure that the steering wheel is centered, which we have already done before we did any of those measurements, but we're just gonna check it one last time. Nobody's moved the car, so it should be good. I always like to take and just adjust some of the slop. Every steering column, whether it's factory or race car, has a little bit of slop left to right. So you try to balance that out. Just kind of unwind that a little bit. Now that we have our parallel lines set up on the car, now comes the fun part. So in the beginning, when we were setting up these parallel lines, we used the center cap, which is a nice flat surface, to figure out what our lines were from left to right. And we kept a depth because we're trying to be in the middle of the wheel. So take that same depth from the ruler to the line, and you're gonna transfer it to the outer edge of the wheel on the front and the rear. Now this gets a little bit tricky because here we have a nice flat surface where the ruler can't rock much. Here you do have a surface where you can move a lot. So I like to use the lines on the ruler kind of as my index. So on the metric side, it might not line up with the SAE side, but it'll at least show you where straight is. So I come over here, make sure I'm not touching the tire. The tire should not be affecting anything at all. Also, one thing we didn't note, when you're doing any alignments or corner bounce or anything, make sure you have all of the tires at the same pressure. That's somewhat important. If you have one drastically different than the other, you may see some weird things. It's amazing how much little adjustments can change everything on a car. So come back here, we're gonna read off our number. We don't run really any toe at all in the rear of this car. It might have a differential of maybe a 0.5 mil or so. Right now we're at 65 mil. Come to the front. And we're right around 64 and a half. So we have, a 0.5 mil of toe in. If the number is bigger in the front, that means that the wheel, here's our parallel line, if it's bigger in the front, that means that the wheel is toed in because the gap from here to here is longer than the rear. If the wheel is toed out, your number in the rear is going to be bigger. So we know that that one is basically 0.5 mil in. So we're going to come over to the board and we're going to make a note of it. This is going to be toe. I always like to do version 1 because we're probably going to do this a lot. So back here we're 0.5 mil in. Negative is in. Obviously you're going to come over to each corner and you're going to do the exact same thing. So you're just going to figure out what the rear number is, figure out what the front number is, subtract the two, figure out which one's the shortest, and that'll tell you whether it's in or out. At this point too, standing over top of it, you should be able to see with your parallel lines whether the car is towed out or towed in. Obviously, string lining does not do camber. Camber, you're going to need a flat edge and a, not scale.
Camber gauge? Level?
Level. There you go. Thank you. I'm sure someone on the internet has already typed it before I can
Someone
spit it out.
typed it in.
But, yes, that's how you do that. So, you just do that on each corner, and then obviously you're going to write it down, and then you're going to lift the car up, make your adjustments, come back, align your lines again, make sure everything's parallel again, check that 3 times, and do it again. This is a long, tedious process, so if you're going to do this, make sure you have lots of time to do it. And with that, it's time to put Savannah to work for a minute. So all 4 corners were right. The left rear was a little bit aggressive. I think we had hit some bumps in the last event. But Savannah is down in there making the adjustment now. Obviously, you guys can remove the strings when you're making adjustments. Savannah's a weirdo and likes to lay on the ground when working on the car. I like to have it up in the air so I can get better leverage, but you know, you guys know, Savannah's a weirdo.
Whatever.
So she's just tightening that thing back down, and then we're gonna get our left to right measurement equal again, and we're gonna check all 4 corners again. Like I said, it's a tedious process. You're gonna do everything 100 times.
So that's pretty much it. Obviously, every adjustment you make is going to change other numbers that you see on the car as far as camber, toe, and caster and bump steer are involved. So you're going to want to check everything else. But after you've made your adjustments, you need to make sure you recenter everything and make sure your numbers stay the same, because obviously, like Kevin mentioned, if you're jacking the car up or putting it on the lift, it might shimmy a little bit when you set it back down and the suspension settles. Otherwise, you're just trying to get those numbers where you want them. We didn't really go into specifics on what the alignment for this car is, because everybody's going to be different depending on the type of car, depending on the tire, the type of racing you're doing. So we didn't really get into that, but yeah. So we all learned something today. I don't know if Kevin learned anything, but he taught people things.
I talked
And
a
that's
lot.
why we like Kevin.
I talked a lot.
It's okay.
All right, well, Savannah knows how to align things. Hopefully you guys know how to align things now. Like she said, you know, we didn't get into the specifics of that specific car, but that's not what we were showing you. We were showing you how to do string alignments, and I think we did that. Do you know how to do it now?
Mostly. With guidance.
Well, now you can refer to this video.
Refer to the video.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, we'll see you guys next time.